Another theory, still in the same neighborhood, insists that the Scythians were the descendants of Gomer's son Ashkenaz, which would make him Magog's nephew. Thus the Magogites are of the Japhetic line, though they may or may not be identified specifically with the Scythians. Either way, their ancestry is a close family matter, and their territorial boundaries can be expected to overlap to a great extent. Perhaps we can pin down Magog another way. Gog, its leader, is said in this translation to be the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. If he's the prince, it would be logical to assume he would be in close geographical proximity. So it should be helpful if we can figure out who these other nations were. Unfortunately, we can't even get past the first name without running into controversy. When we say Rosh, everybody in the modern world immediately thinks Russia. But if you're reading the King James Version, and most others, it simply says the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. What's up? The Hebrew word Rosh, meaning head, chief, ruler, or principal, is translated chief or head 423 times in the Hebrew Old Testament. It is never translated Russia. It seems, therefore, to be highly presumptive to suggest that Rosh is a proper name in this one case, just because we recognize the name and can readily imagine how a big, strong bear of a nation could think that they could get away with invading somebody as small as Israel. The name Russia is derived from an 11th century Viking word, Rus. Linguists tell us that although words morph over time and usage, it is generally the vowels that change, not the consonants. Thus, Rosh, which should be a RS, might change into Rush, but probably not into Ross or Rus. This fact alone makes it extremely unlikely that Rosh means Russia. The text, therefore, almost certainly means the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. By the way, one reason for the relative stability of consonants when compared to vowels is that ancient languages that were written with phonetic alphabets, notably Hebrew, often didn't include vowels at all. The pronunciation and meaning of a word, written as a string of consonants, were determined from the context. It was possible, therefore, to radically alter the meaning of a passage just by assigning, either accidentally or deliberately, incorrect vowel sounds to it. And there is strong evidence that the Masoretic scribes who transmitted our Hebrew scriptures to us, complete with vowel points added a couple of thousand years after the fact, did that very thing, purposely trying to obfuscate the messianic impact of the Tanakh. The consonants, however, are not nearly so susceptible to tampering. If you'd like an eye-opening book at how clear and stunningly beautiful Yahweh's message can be with the correct vowels in the Hebrew text, I'd strongly suggest you check out Craig Wynn's book, Yada Yahweh, available free at www.yadayahweh.com. But I digress. We were back in Ezekiel trying to identify the tribal territories of the listed players in the coming Magog War. Some commentators, taking the Rosh equals Russia myth and expanding upon it, have noticed the vague similarity between Meshech and Moscow and between Tubal and Tobolsk, jumping to the hasty conclusion that the capitals of Russia and Siberia are meant. But there's nothing quite so sinister as that afoot here. Referring back to Genesis 10, we see that both Meshech and Tubal were brothers of Magog, sons of Japheth and grandsons of Noah. Meshech, depending on who you listen to, settled either north, south, or east of the Black Sea, and the truth is probably all of the above. Most commentators equate Meshech with Phrygia in modern west-central Turkey. Linguistically, equating Meshech with Moscow runs into the same kind of difficulty Rosh did. M-esh-K would have to be changed to M-S-K, or worse, to the Russian variant Moskva, MSKV. However, M-esh-K fits Mushki, the name by which the early Greeks would have known Phrygia, quite well indeed. Others place them slightly to the east in the Caucasus Mountains. Assyrian inscriptions from the time of Sargon refer to a people living in the Caucasus Range as Moschi. So take your pick, east or west, or both. Bottom line, if Gog is the chief prince of Meshech, he's going to have to somehow exercise authority over west-central Turkey or points east. And what about Tubal? There aren't any linguistic problems linking Tubal with Tobolsk, but that city is in the middle of Siberia, about 3,000 miles away from anything else we've looked at so far. It's like saying that Gog is the mayor of both Seattle and Acapulco. It therefore behooves us to look for more likely candidates. As it turns out, TBL is a perfect fit for Tabal in eastern Asia Minor, modern Georgia, just east of the Black Sea. Nor is it too much of a stretch to imagine that the name of the Georgian city Tbilisi got its name from our old friend Tubal. So what we have so far might be rendered,
"Set your face against Gog from the people near the Caspian Sea, and spread out even onward to India, the chief prince of Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, the Georgian Republic, and northern Iran."
Gog could either be the leader of these lands or a leader who comes from this area, centered on the Caucasus region between the Black and Caspian Seas. Bear in mind that a leader needn't be born in the nation he leads. Napoleon was born in Corsica. Hitler was born in Austria. Osama bin Laden made Afghanistan his base of operation, though he's a Saudi national. And Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the head of Iran's al-Qaeda terrorists, actually hails from Jordan. And the land of Magog? If I had to render a guess as to the identity of Magog as a modern political entity from clues in the Bible, Josephus, and the morning paper, it would quickly boil down to a very short list. Only one nation today fits all the criteria. Who? I'll tell you in a minute. But first, let's look at the list of Magog's other allies, beginning with Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya. At last, somebody familiar. Well, maybe. You see, we need to take into consideration the time in which the prophet wrote, and we would be advised to take modern place names with a big grain of salt as well. Let's start with Persia. Every school child knows that Persia is Iran, or at least they used to when I was a kid. But Ezekiel, who died about 560 BC, lived in a very different world. Persia proper was in what is now the southern portion of Iran, primarily the area east of the Persian Gulf. By the end of Ezekiel's life, however, Persia's borders extended well beyond those of modern Iran. In the terms of his day, Persia, with her close ally Media, whose land she eventually absorbed, encompassed Urartu, Elam, which is Susiana, Parthia, Bactria, and Gandhara. In modern terminology, that equates roughly to Iran, northern Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and eastern Turkey. And within a few short decades, the list would include Pakistan in the east, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, and a big chunk of southern Kazakhstan in the north, and Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, the rest of Turkey, the rest of Iraq, Egypt, and Israel in the west. In case you missed it, that's pretty much the whole map of the Middle East today. Note that with the exception of that little Massachusetts-sized sliver of ground hugging the Mediterranean's eastern shoreline, almost all of it is Muslim-controlled. What's hard to say is how much of these lands were meant to be included in Ezekiel's simple description, Persia. Of particular interest on another level is how many of the modern nations on the list have nuclear arsenals. In other words, is Pakistan in or out? And will Iran have them by the time all this unfolds? In Ezekiel's lifetime, Pakistan was not yet part of the empire. I'm afraid there's only one way to find out for sure. Miss the rapture. Ethiopia seems simple enough, but it's not. The Genesis 10 name is Cush, who was the eldest son of Ham, that is, the brother of Japheth and Shem, and son of Noah. From the point of view of the Table of Nations, Cush is the father of those who settled in eastern Africa, south of Egypt. Today, that would include the Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea. Egypt, by the way, was originally named Mizraim, after one of Cush's brothers. Egypt, or Mizraim, is not specifically named in the Ezekiel 38 prophecy, but stay tuned. The word translated Libya was another son of Ham, a man named Put, or Phut. His descendants have spread from the border of Egypt, or Mizraim, all the way across northern Africa, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. The next nation on the list of Magog's allies is Gomer. For some reason, many, still fixated on the non-existent Russian connection, have tried valiantly to identify Gomer with Germany, perhaps seeing a linguistic link between Gomer's consonants, GMR, and Deutschland's derived initials, GRM. It won't work. The R and M are out of order. The similarity is superficial at best, but again we find a perfect match right where we've come to expect it. GMR was well known to the ancients as Chimeria. The gutturals often shift from G to C. And where is Chimeria? Its other name is Cappadocia, located in, you guessed it, Asia Minor, as in eastern Turkey. There's only one ally left on the list. Togarmah was the third son of Gomer. As early as the 14th century BC, its territory was described as lying, quote, between Cheremish and Haran, unquote, on a main trade route through southwestern Armenia. It was called Til-Garamanu by the Assyrians and bordered Tabal, or Tubal, on the south. In other words, Togarmah was located in modern Armenia, Azerbaijan, and northern Iran, an area that's beginning to look real suspicious. Once again, careful exegesis and a little research have put me in hot water. Among premillennial expositors, the vast majority of them insist that Magog is Russia, Gog is some kind of crazed commie throwback, and Meshech is Moscow, and Tubal is Tobolsk. I'm sorry, I just can't buy it. It's not just the ethnological and geographical evidence above, though that's compelling enough. It's that there's no motive for Russia to attack Israel. Nothing rational, anyway. Israel has no natural resources to speak of, no strategic mineral deposits, although the Dead Sea, which it shares with Jordan, has some pretty interesting stuff in it. No vast reserves of oil, at least none that anyone has found yet. The intriguing possibilities latent in verses like,
Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Genesis 14:10.
have not been explored by the geologists. And even if they did find significant quantities of oil under the sands of the Negev, that in itself is still not a significant incentive for the Russians to invade. They themselves have the seventh largest oil reserves of any nation on earth. As of now, whatever prosperity Israel enjoys is the direct result of the industry of its people and blessing of Yahweh. Destroy its people, and you destroy its wealth. Nations like Russia, that is, sane and self-interested, do not unilaterally attack foreign powers, especially those with nuclear capability, without extremely good reasons. I'll admit, as long as Russia was merely the largest province in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the whole Ezekiel 38 scenario made very little sense. But now that the republics are independent once again, the pieces are starting to come together. We're looking for a motive here. Who wants Israel dead, no matter the cost, no matter the consequences? Sure, people have persecuted the Jews for millennia, but never against their own perceived self-interests. But today there exists one nation whose hatred for the Jews regularly boils over into suicidal rage, a nation whose sole point of unity and purpose is their often stated goal of ridding themselves and the world of the Jews forever.